Now, if you love an epic punting battle, then Week 13's Jets-Falcons matchup was must-see TV.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by the GameTime app. Just download the app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And guys, if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman. Been covering the Falcons for so long. Formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP, still going strong on this illustrious podcast. You may know me as Sirius Black. You may know me as Mr. Drew. You may know me as the prophet that predicted basically this exact game to come out. But, you know, if you don't know me, then now you do. And please become an everydayer so that you can get to know me better. And listen, make this podcast your first listen each and every day. And all you got to do so is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So we'll break down this Week 13 win for the Atlanta Falcons. It wasn't the prettiest win. We'll get into, Clark Phillips and the defensive stepping up and some of the injuries and how they may impact the rest of the season. We'll talk a little bit about whether or not this Falcons team with this win, have they finally turned the corner, and can we actually start to have optimism and hope and get back to believing in the Atlanta Falcons? Wow, this is a crazy thing to say. But we'll start off breaking down sort of how this game was ugly, right? And it was like, if only there was like a podcast out there, like a daily podcast that you could listen to that basically said this was going to be an ugly, low-scoring sort of 13-10 game, and it was ugly, low-scoring 13-8 game, And if there was a podcast out there that, could possibly predict that, like you guys should probably make that podcast your first listen, but I digress. Anyway, as you can tell from my, epic sarcasm, this game basically went exactly how I kind of expected, or not exactly, but, nothing ever goes exactly according to plan, but pretty close to what you thought. You thought the Falcons offense was going to struggle against a very good Jets defense that matched up very well, that could take away a lot of their strengths and, exploit some of their weaknesses. But fortunately, the Falcons defense did step up. They created turnovers, they got some stops. A stagnating Jets offense continued to stagnate with bottom shelf quarterback play. They pulled Tim Boyle, in the fourth quarter after his interception to Jesse Bates. And, the Falcons played a relatively clean game. They did not have any turnovers, although there were some close calls. We'll get more on that later in the episode. But, the only touchdown of this game came to Michael Pruitt. Much to my chagrin, my Parker Hesse agenda is not thriving today because he missed a block on a safety, one of the Jets, the first score of the game, which was a safety that the Falcons gave up, where the Jets were, at least early on, were winning the field position battle, right? But like that Michael Pruitt touchdown came after Nate Landman forced a fumble early in the second quarter that gave the Falcons a short field starting off that drive at the Jets 47, and it did result in 7 points on a nice ball from Desmond Ridder to Michael Pruitt. But it was a kind of a field position battle at safety. The Jets were able to down the ball at the 1 yard line on one of the Falcons' early series, I think late in the first quarter. I can't remember exactly if it was like their second or third series, and that led to the safety. But you had 16 combined punts in this game, 9 from Bradley Pinion. That's a season high for him this year, and 7 from Thomas Morstead, the old Falcons legend, Thomas Morstead. Now, it tells you that the Jets offense has been worse than they have been this past Sunday, because that is not a season high for Thomas Morstead, although some of that is owed to the turnovers that probably would have been punts that would have potentially got him to matching his season high of 11 earlier this season. But, basically this game, if you listen to the pod all week, if you were an everydayer all week long, then you really don't have to listen to this episode, because basically everything we talked about on Thursday and Friday with Locked On Jets host John Bushko and Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta on Friday pretty much kind of happened in this game. The Falcons offensive game plan, I think, was pretty vanilla. I think owing to the fact that the Jets kind of had a very favorable matchup, especially on the defensive line against the Falcons offensive line. The Falcons weren't able to really get their running game going, given that matchup, given the weather. I don't think this was a game. It made sense to me for the Falcons to play this one conservatively. So, if you're sitting here griping about the play calling, like, I mean, I get it, but like at the same time, like I feel like you're expecting things that were never going to happen. The hope was that you could run the ball effectively enough that you could avoid 3rd and long situations in this game where that Jets D-line could get really after the quarterback. And while the Jets D-line didn't really dominate that matchup in the ways that they could have, the Falcons really didn't have any, favorable situations with 3rd downs, right? They got into a lot of 3rd and longs in this game. They were successfully able to convert some of them. But it was a big reason why the Falcons weren't very good on 3rd downs in this game. They started in the first half, they were 1 for 5 on their 3rd down tries. They got a little bit better in the second half. They got into some 3rd and manageables late in the game in the fourth quarter, but still weren't successful in converting a lot of those. And so they finished this game like 4-14 on 3rd downs in this game. So again, it was just a lot of just sort of like, we'll move the ball, for 6 plays here, and then we'll punt it back to you. And then like, that's kind of how it went back and forth. So, I think the main reason why the Jets were able to shut down the run, in part due to the predictability, the conservativeness, the vanillaness, whatever you want to say, but the offensive line did not play as well this week as they did last week, right? We talked about it, we joke about the Parker Hesse agenda, but like, the big, catalyst for the Falcons rushing success last week was how dominant the offensive line was across the board, minus maybe Jake Matthews in that Saints game. And with, Matthew Bergeron going back to being not very good and Jake Matthews just sort of continue to be okay, and then you couple that with an injury to Caleb McGarry at the right tackle position, you're not seeing the improvement, the ability for this offensive line to dominate the line of scrimmage like they did last week against a good Jets defense. So I think that was a big part of it. They did get things a little bit better going in the second half. Bijan had a couple of nice runs in the second half to at least get a decent amount of yards. I think they had like 60 yards rushing in the second half after a 30-yard performance in the first half. So for the most part, again, it was just a pretty vanilla sort of game for the Falcons. And fortunately, they came away with a W. We'll take a deeper look at some of the defensive standouts, especially Clark Phillips, that sort of really stepped up in this game. And then we'll later talk about sort of whether or not the Falcons have sort of turned a corner with this win. And we'll get into all of that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So today's episode of Locked On Falcons is sponsored by BetterHelp, and now is the season of giving, and it's the perfect time to give to yourself with the gift of therapy this holiday season with BetterHelp. And anybody who's been a long-time listener to this podcast over the last year knows, how much of a fan of BetterHelp I am. Big reason why I started up with BetterHelp last year was because, they're much more affordable than traditional offline therapy. And we make that even more affordable with our, promo code over at betterhelp.com/lockedon. And the beautiful thing about BetterHelp is it's convenient, right? You don't have to really leave your house. You can meet with your therapist via computer, via phone, whatever you need to do. It's designed to be convenient to you, flexible to your schedule, right? And you can get started pretty easily with a brief questionnaire that'll get you matched with a licensed therapist. And then if you find you and your therapist aren't necessarily meshing in the ways that you want, you can switch therapists at any time with no additional charge. So in the season of giving, give to yourself what you need with BetterHelp by visiting betterhelp.com/lockedon, and you'll get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So as we continue today's Locked On Falcons, want to plug the innovation and iconic Locked On Podcast Network, who've started up the national 24/7 stream on Locked On Sports Today, covering all the leagues, all of the major sports stories. So get geared up on this 24/7 streaming channel, the first of its kind at Locked On Sports Today. And of course, check out Locked On Sports Atlanta for a similar 24/7 streaming channel. So you can get the latest updates on Georgia's disappointing non-playoff, then no three-peat for Georgia this year. Although, whoever they face in the bowl game, good luck to them. So yeah, go check out Locked On Sports Atlanta. But anyway, let's talk about this Falcon game. I was about to go on this Georgia tangent, so I'm not going to do that. Go check out Locked On Bulldogs for that. But the defensive depth stepped up in this game, especially Clark Phillips. AJ Terrell exited this game, on the opening series, I think it was, on a hit to Breece Hall. And as I told the Discord during the game, like Breece Hall, also hits back, and AJ Terrell had a concussion, exited the game, and it was Clark Phillips that came into the game that lined up at outside corner instead of Trey Flowers, with Mike Hughes being inactive this week due to a hand injury. And Phillips did a solid job, right? He was very active in run support. He was sort of tag teaming on that fumble that Nate Landman forced, where he kind of wrapped the guy's legs and Nate Landman came in and punched the ball out. His coverage was mostly solid. Like, there was one rough play he had on Garrett Wilson towards the end of the game. But other than that, like, the Jets weren't going after him seemingly in a major way. It seemed like they were picking on Jeff Okudah more in this game. We'll talk more a little bit about why that possibly was. But, earlier this season when Okudah was out with his first couple of games, and we saw Trey Flowers struggle in this defense, I know a lot of people were pushing for Clark Phillips to replace him as the outside corner. And I was skeptical of that because basically the way that the Falcons want to play, which is a press man heavy cover scheme, is not really the scheme that you would draw up for Clark Phillips, who's much more of an off zone corner. And so I'll be curious when the film drops and sort of see if the Falcons were still playing that press man heavy scheme, or it looked like to me it was a lot of zone in this game, and I think that was a contributing factor to Okudah's struggles. But we'll see, right? If AJ Terrell's missing a week of against the Bucs this week, that's ill-timed, because we know that even with a healthy AJ Terrell, this secondary has struggled to cover these Bucs receivers, and so that's going to be a big test next week against Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Clark Phillips against Mike Evans. That doesn't feel like a great matchup, but we'll see how it goes. So we'll see, watching the film, sort of what changes or takeaways I have. But for the most part, it was an impressive performance from Clark Phillips. The other injuries worth updating on that we don't have the full updates on, but Arthur Smith was at least optimistic, talking about Nate Landman and Kaleb McGarry, who both exited this game with knee injuries. And you worry about that because of the Jets turf situation. We've seen a couple of guys blow out their Achilles on this field. And so, those injuries could be serious, where if you tweak a thing, on this turf, like, that could be a problem. So we'll get updates, on Monday with the MRIs and whatnot, but at least Arthur Smith was seemingly positive initially. But you saw Nate Landman exit in the fourth quarter with a knee injury. Andre Smith stepped in for him. Did have a fumble recovery on the Richie Grant sack strip. But you saw really some issues with him in coverage towards the end of the game. Nate Landman was already a question mark in coverage, and Andre Smith is a even bigger step back in terms of that. So if Nate Landman is out for any period of time, that's gonna be a major issue at the Falcons linebacker position, because it was like we went into the season being like, we don't know if we have more than two linebackers, and then Nate Landman emerged, and it's like, okay, well, we have three linebackers, but it's like, I don't know if we're going to be able to stretch to find out if we have four with Andre Smith, but we'll see about that. With Kaleb McGarry, he exited early in the second quarter, I think like a play or two before the Pruitt touchdown. And then Storm Norton, the Falcons swing tackle, stepped in for him. And, Storm Norton had a quiet game, right? Like, you didn't really notice him in a positive way. You didn't notice him in a negative way. That's kind of all you really want from a swing tackle. Like, offensive linemen, these, we all, the old adage is like, you don't want to see offense. If you don't notice offensive linemen, that means they're doing their job. I don't know if that's 100% true. But it is one of those things where it's like, for backup offensive linemen, I think that tends to be more true than not, right? Like, you don't want to notice backup offensive linemen, and that probably means that they're doing their job. So, but that probably contributed to some of the Falcons' run struggles, right? Because Norton is not as punishing a run blocker as McGarry, although you could make an argument that they're probably a wash at this point in terms of pass protection, and that seemed to be the case in this game. So we'll see how that goes. But in terms of other defensive standouts, 2 sacks in this game for Bud Dupree. A game sort of clinching sack for Arnold Ebiketie, where he came unblocked on a final drive on a 3rd and 10 that really sort of didn't end the series, but basically pretty much killed that drive for the for the Jets. I'm sorry. And then you had Richie Grant getting the other sack that forced the fumble on the previous series prior to that final drive. So, solid day for the defense. Jesse Bates got the interception on a very bad overthrow from Tim Boyle as well. So overall solid day for the defense. We saw a couple of shot plays from the Jets that hit. A lot of those seem to come against Okudah, which I know at least one of those was a whole shot against like cover two. It looked like, and that goes back to something we've talked about a lot with Jeff Okudah, where it's like, especially over the last month, where it's like his zone abilities aren't great. And I think that was a contributing factor to why he seemed to struggle in this game and why Clark Phillips didn't, because I'm assuming, again, we'll see if the film confirms this, but the Falcons kind of switched to playing more zone to basically suit Clark Phillips rather than Jeff Okudah. And like Jeff Okudah is this press man corner and Clark Phillips is this off zone corner. And like those two skill sets don't really mesh on the same field at the same time. So like if you play a certain style of defense with, one of those guys is going to be put in a bad position. And so like that's the beauty of AJ Terrell, because he can play either ski style, and so he's kind of the linchpin that holds it all together. So we'll see what adjustments the Falcons make this week against, again, a very good Bucs team. So that's going to be a big challenge for them moving forward. But we will continue talking about what's moving forward for this Falcon team, whether or not they've turned the corner. Was this the type of win that we needed to have more confidence in this team moving forward? And we'll break that down to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So guys, buying tickets to your favorite events should be fast and easy, and GameTime allows you to do that. Whether you're looking for sports, music, comedy, theater, new you, they got killer last minute deals. They got all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Their killer last minute deals mean that you can buy tickets right up to the start of the event, right? Their all in prices mean you're not going to get hit with hidden fees. Their views from your seat means that you can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect before you arrive. And their best price guarantee means that you'll always get the best price. If you can find tickets in the same section and row for less, they'll credit you 110% the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So wrapping up today's Locked On Falcons, tomorrow's episode, we should be joined by Alan Stirk of the Falcoholic, who was at this game, covering this game live on in New York. And so we'll get Alan's insight into this game on tomorrow's episode, if all things go according to plan. So that's what's in store for you as you make this illustrious podcast your first listen tomorrow. But wrapping up today's illustrious episode, let's talk about if this was the sort of Turner Corning. Yes, Turner Corning win. Corner turning win. I don't know why this is Turner Corning. Michael Turner is on the mind, I guess. But sure, let's say it is a corner turning win, a Turner Corning win. Sure, let's go with that. Let's kind of the Falcons did what they needed to do. It wasn't, you wanted them to play a clean game, right? Like that was to me the priority, right? And again, technically they did play a clean game. No turnovers officially on the stat sheet, although the officials kind of bailed them out on one, right? Ritter fumbled the opening snap, but then recovered it. And then late in the third quarter, he threw a pick to Kyle Pitts on an overthrow to Kyle Pitts. And that was wiped out by a Jets penalty, illegal contact on the defender covering Pitts. And, maybe Ritter thought it was a free play. Maybe he saw the illegal contact in the play and threw it up for Kyle Pitts to make a play. That's debatable without seeing the film. Like I need to watch the film and see Ritter staring down Kyle Pitts, seeing the contact and be like, okay, now I'm going to throw it before I can reach that conclusion. But like, I would probably say Pitts let Ritter down on that throw because the Pitts just did a poor job tracking the ball in the air and really didn't make a play on it. And that allowed DJ Reed to make an easy play on it. But so it didn't count. So, again, technically it's like, okay, well, it's like the ends justify the means, I guess, we'll just ignore some of the means, right? We process results, all that sort of stuff. So it's like, okay, they played a clean game, right? You wanted a clean turnover-free game. I'm sorry. And then you wanted the defense to play, well to, again, win a sort of a 13-10 type of ball game, and you got that. So I can't be mad at it. I'm not necessarily impressed by it. right? I wanted to be lowballing the Falcons, right? I wanted, one of those late drives for the Falcons to just kind of pound the ball down the Jets' throat and salt away this game, and I would have came away feeling, but they couldn't really move the chains in the fourth quarter like they have in the previous games with their run game, and that led to them giving the Jets more opportunities to come back and steal this win. Someone joked in the Discord last week when I told him that Allen was going to be on the podcast, and he said no Geno Smith mentions. I'm sorry, you're going to get your Geno Smith mention. There was part of me that was worried about Tim Boyle pulling a Geno Smith because of the injuries that we had in the game that led to some potential mismatches there in the fourth quarter. If they just kind of spammed, where's Andre Smith? We're just going to throw it at him the rest of the game, but it didn't go that way. Thankfully, Falcons pass rush stepped up. So, I feel like it is a corner turning win, right? It's not to say that, the Falcons going to be on cruise control for the rest of the year. They can just as easily win their next 5 as they can lose each one of their last 5. But it does make you feel like, okay, like this team, when we break down these matchups and we say, okay, the Falcons need to do X, Y, and Z to win this game, you feel much more confident that they'll be able to do that, even if they didn't necessarily check all of those boxes in the greatest way today, right? Like if their X, Y, and Z this week was, establish the run, and it's like, did they? Yeah, I guess they did okay, right? They did okay. And then you needed someone other in the passing game, someone other than Drake London to kind of step up in the passing game, because Sauce Gardner was probably going to shut him down or at least keep him contained, which was the case. I think Drake only had like 1 or 2 catches in this game. And that player was Kyle Pitts. He led the team with catches, had like 4 catches for like 51 yards. Some of those were critical catches. There were a couple of times where the critical plays, like we just discussed on the overthrow on the faux interception, fauxception. Oh, sorry. I'm cracking myself up, guys, because I am much more entertaining, and I'm not that entertaining than this Falcon game is. So I have to find ways to entertain myself. But you saw Pitts make some critical plays, not make some other ones, is a point I want to make. But it did feel like overall it was a step forward in that Pitts Ritter building up that rapport that we've been talking about a bunch on the podcast over the last week or two. And then the defense got stops and created turnovers, right? They gave up a couple of big explosive plays, but again, part of that may be owed to them changing how they had to play defense, after the first quarter of this game and playing a style of defense that they didn't necessarily want to play. So that can be forgiven relatively easily. So it's like, okay, they kind of did all the X, Y, and Z of this game. And, the formula for their success is run the football, don't turn the ball over, and play good defense. And it's like, and I know you guys are like watching this and listening to this, like, oh man, that's the type of deep insight that you can only get on Locked On Falcons. A team that just runs the ball, doesn't turn the ball over, and plays good defense can win football games. I know, like it's not sexy. It's the least sexy. I was going to say something offensive, so I was going to describe something that is not sexy. But hey, to each their own. Some people might be into that sort of thing. So, it is what it is. So, yeah. So overall, all that to say, I'm just talking now. All that to say, like, I think it was enough, right? It was enough, right? For us to be like, okay, next week when they play the Bucs, when they need to run the ball, not turn the ball over and play good defense, I feel better about them being able to do that. Again, we'll see what the injuries, that's going to definitely impact that matchup. But we know that this team tends to put their best foot forward at home. And like, or at least I know some of you guys were still hopeful that like this team would make a big stride forward on the road in the conditions against a good, arguably like the 3rd best defense in the league. Probably it's like what, Kansas City, Cleveland, and the Jets, Philly. Like those are like 4 out of the top 5 defenses in the league. Correct me in the comments if you disagree. But I think we got what we thought, they are. We thought they were. And we did not let them off the hook in this one. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. So we'll see if the Falcons can pass their remaining tests, right? So I someone commented on a video earlier this week saying like, Aaron, you said this Jets game is going to be a test. You said last week's game against the Saints was going to be a test. You think every game is going to be a test? And it's like, yeah, I do. That's how the NFL works. Every game is a test. You take 17 tests every single year, and hopefully you pass more tests than you fail, and get a winning record and make the playoffs. And then you're tested in different ways and new ways in the postseason. That's football, like, yeah, every game is going to be a test. And I feel better about the Falcons passing the remaining tests, at least more of them than not. We'll see, right? They just got to win 3 games and we get our first winning season in 6 years. Hopefully they can win more than that and, feel a little bit better going in January. If they can find a way to win 4 out of their next 5, I think we'll feel a lot better about, how this team finished compared to how they started. Throwback line for the everydayers from something we talked about a lot this year. So we'll see. So overall, again, this game is not, no deep cuts in terms of, oh man, we learned this about the Falcons. It's like, okay, the same old Falcons. We learned that Clark Phillips may be better outside corner than we thought. And we learned that Desmond Ridder isn't necessarily guaranteed to turn the ball over in a road game, although he sure did try. I love it. So like we learned some things about the Falcons. That Bradley Pinion, man, he's doing good things. So that's it. We'll talk more about this game with Alan Stirk tomorrow, and continue to make us your first listen, guys. Appreciate you. Check out Locked On Bulldogs if you want to get more insight into how the Georgians finish the season. If you aren't too depressed by that, sign up for BetterHelp. But check out Locked On Hawks as well. We haven't given our guy Brad Rowland too much love on this show since the season started, but of course the Hawks are doing their thing. And of course, Locked On Sports Atlanta, where Monday we'll be doing a Falcons football party with Tori McElhaney, Jarvis Davis, Tanidra Batiste. Get more insight into this game. That's on Locked On Sports Atlanta. And of course, Locked On Sports Today is, of course, for that 24/7 streaming channel. Locked On Sports Atlanta also has a 24/7 streaming channel. It's all part, guys, of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.